In today's episode, we are going to talk about the type 1 and YouTube, embracing perfectionism and authenticity. You are going to hear about the key traits of an Enneagram type 1. We're going to talk about the challenges that type 1s will have and how they can overcome them. We're going to talk about the different strategies of embracing your authenticity. And we're going to figure out how to turn that self criticism that type 1s always have to become a positive force for your YouTube channel. Welcome to the Enneareal podcast, Women, Moms, Real Estate, and the Enneagram. I'm your host, Melody Wilson, a certified Enneagram and real estate coach. If you're a high-achieving realtor mom looking to find balance and unlock your full potential, you're in the right place. In this podcast, we explore the intersection of women, real estate, and the Enneagram. Join me as I provide Enneagram insights and practical tools tailored specifically for women in the real estate industry. Together, we'll uncover strategies to navigate the unique challenges and opportunities and find harmony in all areas of your life. So, type 1, if you didn't listen to our first episode, I kind of do a summary of the 9 different types with Enneagram. Enneagram stands for 9, and I just want to call it the 9 personality types. But that really is butchering it because we're not just talking about personality types. We are talking about your core fears, your core motivations, kind of what makes you who you are, and totally understanding self-awareness and making sure that we can help you grow. That's the biggest thing. So in today's episode, we're going to feature all things type 1. And of course, I wouldn't be a real estate coach without throwing in how are we going to help you with our biggest challenge these days is YouTube. And YouTube has given me a lot of success and I want to help others with it. And so this is the mindset part of YouTube. If you're looking for the tactical things of how do I get leads, how do I set up my YouTube channel, you will want to check out my membership or check out some of my YouTube how-to videos, and you can find out all the tactical stuff. In this episode and in this podcast, we talk about the mindset things that prevent you from being successful, because that is a very key piece to being successful and to being able to accomplish what you want to on things such as YouTube. So the first thing I was going to talk to you about is the key traits of an Enneagram type 1. Now, last time in our podcast, we talked about how I'm certified with the Enneagram University and I'm going through the 9 type book that they've given us to kind of help us give an overview and a framework for our podcast to discuss the different types and to kind of dive in and see how that looks for a realtor, especially women in real estate. We are a different breed. I find realtors are not your everyday person. We deal with so many things and we are always on call. We don't really relate to the 9 to 5 because we don't work to the 9 to 5, but of course we relate to them because they're our clients. So I digress. Anyways, some of the key traits of an Enneagram type 1, we talked about this last time and we'll just review this. Their core fears being bad, corrupt, evil, or wrong, and their core desires to be good, pure, perfect, having integrity, and doing the right thing. Now, a lot of times you will see type 1s show up as a perfectionist. That's the other nickname that type 1s have. And type 1s like to have everything in its place. I don't want to say they all have OCD, but they probably have to some degree a little bit of that desire to just be overly organized. Really, really, everything needs to be perfect and it's in its place. They need to have processes. So that realtor may have a process already in place, whereas most realtors do not have that in place. They have a very strong inner critic, and we talked about that last time. That's one of the differentiating factors between an Enneagram type 1 and other Enneagrams. That inner critic is really loud. So when it comes to YouTube, for example, that voice in their head that says they won't be good enough or they don't know enough things before they film, that's something we really need to address. That inner critic needs to be labeled. I know it sounds kind of weird and hokey even, but you need to put a name to that inner critic. So you can name it and tell that inner critic to be quiet, right? Because that's not truth. That is something that is made up and it's being manifested. And if it takes over your life and it prevents you from doing the things you need to do, then we don't want that inner critic around. Now, some of their strengths is, I'm going to read this verbatim. They are intentional, self-disciplined, responsible, hardworking, improvement focused, and excellent at taking anything from good to great. They have high standards, morals, and ethics. They drive people to do the right thing, even when it's difficult. They are lifelong students, learning and growing while encouraging others to reach their highest potential too. So, type ones, I love my type ones. They're close to my heart because I really resonate with their hardworking, they're self disciplined. That's something I really appreciate. I think anybody appreciates, especially if that's your realtor out there working for you. You're known to be and someone who has high ethics, right? That's something that people appreciate, and that's how you get that repeat and referral business. And when YouTube audience sees that, when YouTube has figured out that's who your audience is, they're going to push that out to more people. And with YouTube, you want to niche down. And for niching down that specifically, it's so important that you understand your strengths. That is what you want to remember. You want to hear those strengths loud and clear, because when you hear that critic, you want to quiet that critic down by pushing their strengths up. Now, some of the struggles they deal with is that they're really hard on themselves. You don't even need to tell them they did something wrong. They're already so upset with themselves already. And so it's really hard for them to hear criticism, especially harsh criticism. You want to be gentle with that. They don't need to be told. Even you saying and pointing something out, even being very subtle and kind, they'll still take it really hard, because you have to understand they've already had that thought in their head. They already felt insecure and like they were already wrong. So it's really a challenge there. They often feel that things they do aren't good enough. So they're constantly trying to improve, even though what they've done has been really good. They can't seem to take No, they can't take criticism. They also can't seem to take praise because they think they can always do better. And so you have to be careful as a type one to understand sometimes when you do that, you're also not valuing the other person when they're trying to give you praise. You've got to understand that Enneagram type ones also dismiss timelines and others' feelings. They're just so obsessed with like taking that responsibility. And then they feel resentful when they perceive that others aren't putting as much as they are, because no one can work as hard as someone who's so hardworking, especially when they're doing it inside. It's all an internal thing. Now, we mentioned that we're going to cover internal and childhood messages, and this podcast is not, I'm not a therapist. So if there's some things that you realize that are being uncovered, then you should get professional help for sure. This is just giving you an overview of maybe some of your past history maybe impacts who you are today, which we all know that happens, right? So the unconscious childhood message is it's not okay to make mistakes. So as a young child, you were told that. Now, maybe you weren't specifically told that. Maybe you were just told it without knowing. Maybe your parents didn't say to you, you're not good enough, or it's not okay to make mistakes. It has to do with the fact that this is the message you heard as a child, whether it was intentionally out or not. So they process it as you'll receive the love, attention, affirmation you seek when you're the good girl or boy. And so it led to an internal message that says you are good and okay if you do what is right. So that's something that's crazy in terms of like kind of bringing out that childhood pattern that leads to your challenges that you're dealing with. And so, like I said, as a self-awareness journey, you want to acknowledge it. You want to see if there's anything you need to do and deal with it, but it's really important. Now, I want to go back to the key traits. There's other key traits of type ones, which are your wings. So what are wings? Wings are the types that are beside your number. So on the Enneagram, when it is a circle, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, all the way to 9. So the one wing would be to the one side a 9 and the other side a 2. You cannot be a 1 wing 7. You cannot be a 1 wing 5. You can be a 1 with a 9 wing or a 2 wing, or maybe just a 1. Everyone may have tendencies towards a 2 or a 9 just because those are on the side. And as you grow and become more self-aware, you'll be able to kind of figure that out. But what a 1 wing 9 looks like, they've labeled this as the idealist. So they are more relaxed, mild-tempered, idealistic thinkers, more introverted, objective, cerebral, and detached. So they take on some of the attributes of a 9. And so when we get to type 9, you'll be able to kind of figure that out in terms of, oh, I do relate to a 9 as much as I do as 1, but the defining factor is actually going to be which core fear you relate to the most. So if you relate more to a type 1 core fear, then you're a 1 with a 9 wing. Now, the second one is the 1 wing 2, which is the advocate. So this person's usually more outgoing. They're warmer, more helpful, passionate, sensitive, expressive vocally and emotionally. They're extroverted. They could be controlling, critical, and action orientated. So the ones have those wings, and wings are a very interesting thing because with the Enneagram, like I said, there's 9 types, but then there's so many different variations. One of the other basic concepts you want to understand about the Enneagram is that there's the arrows. So you can move as a 1 towards a 7 in health. So you take on the positive attributes of a 7. So you're more optimistic, you are a little bit more spontaneous and fun and self-accepting. You're not so pulled into your 1. So with the type 1 arrows, this is what you look like in stress and in growth. So what happens is the numbers, that's why you see these arrows in the diagram of an Enneagram. When a type 1 is moving towards health, and growth, they move towards the positive attributes of a type 7. So they're seen as more positive and fun and spontaneous. They tend to just be able to be more relaxed. And with them, when they go into stress, the unhealth. So I had talked about this in the first podcast. Whereas when you move into stress mode, that is kind of like the rumble strips of the road, the warning signs, what you need to look out for. If you start to see this in yourself, you're probably stressed if you haven't already noticed. So that's where your inner critic gets more intense. You start to turn more inwards. You feel unlovable, and you just kind of get more withdrawn, and you feel more hopeless, and you feel resentful of other people, and you kind of have this, I don't want to be around, I don't like you, or maybe you're frustrated because you've been working so hard and they don't seem to be working hard. Those are your stress path, and that is the negative traits of a 4. So you can see that the type 1 can move towards a 7 and a 4, but their wings are a 9 or a 2. So they are different in terms of how that is. So a type 7 doesn't just mean that it becomes that in your growth. There are 2 other arrows that you can go to. The basics are the growth and stress that I want you to understand. The other parts are a blind spot and a missing piece. So the missing piece is, if you're really growing, you're going to actually take on the positive attributes of a type 4 that you took on in stress. And you're going to move to a negative traits of a type 7 with, when they call it a blind spot, that's like who you are with your family, your closest people. You'll be taking on the negative traits of a 7. So for example, you become more self-absorbed, demand others to satisfy them, indulgent. You're fixated on what's right. And that usually only shows up with your closest people. And that's not necessarily showing up with everybody, or if you're just in stress randomly. So that's something you want to note as arrows. The growth, the thing that you can do, like in terms of for growth, when you start to identify that you're seeing yourself in that growth, you can just celebrate that. So you can see, if we take a look at the fact that when you're in growth, you are self-accepting and spontaneous and fun, you can see how that could actually relate to social media. Because when a type 1 is in health, they are actually going to be more comfortable on screen. They're going to be more comfortable with video and doing funny reels or creating content. So that means if you know who you are and how to get yourself into growth and be in a healthy space, the YouTube world won't be as difficult as you think. So that's something you might want to kind of tuck away in the back of your mind. Now, this is why I talked about, this is a strategy for embracing authenticity while maintaining your high standards. You can embrace that, who you are as a person. You don't need to pretend to be someone else, because as a type 1, you don't even know how to do that. You just know how to do what's right and what's wrong. And what's right in this situation is to be yourself and to be in health. so that you can deliver that content. And also, who do you want to deliver content to? It's totally fine to take and be what you want to be. You don't need to do what everyone else is doing. So if you relate more to the relocation, then talk all about relocation. Maybe you're going to go into all the details because you're so detail orientated on the whole process of buying, or you're going to talk about the cost of living because you know all the costs or you enjoy that kind of research. So I would definitely figure that out in terms of, if that's your type, there you go. There's a strategy right there to kind of grab that. The other things about type ones that I want to talk about here is that there's a defense mechanism that type ones have. They can there's an unconscious repression of an emotional response that they perceive to be appropriate or unacceptable and instead express an opposite one. So for example, they know anger is wrong, so they express it as irritation. Or they know envy is wrong, that feeling is wrong, so then they will do praise. It's really weird. So since emotions don't just go away, they get buried and then they fester and then they explode. So this is something that you need to be aware of as a type 1. You want to make sure you identify who you are as a type so that you can sort that out. And then if you're on a real estate team, you are able to kind of be very clear with your expectations with those around you. And if you start to see yourself showing those signs, then you can kind of figure that out. Now, some of the strengths and weaknesses at work specifically shows you that you're really good at being responsible, you're good at being reliable and well organized, but you could delay yourself because you're such a perfectionist. So you don't want to deliver that video because it's not quite perfect. You hit record and you recorded it 5 or 6 or 7 times already, but it's still not right. You did something, or you saw something on your shirt or something, and you kept pushing record. That's going to be a big struggle when it comes to video. And how are you going to overcome that? Well, we're going to talk a little bit more about how you can move towards growth, and then we can figure that out, because identifying it is the biggest step, is knowing that that's a weakness that you have. But I think it's really important that we do something with it, not just go, well, this is me, and then therefore that's my excuse, because that's not going to work. The other important thing for you to understand is, okay, so we're moms here. How do we look like as a type 1 mom? So type 1 moms are attentive, consistent, and fair. They tend to be very firm disciplinarians, and they teach their children responsibility and hold their children to equal standards. Now, sometimes we may hold them to too high standards because we already have too high of standards as a type 1. And they're not really known to be overly affectionate. So if your child really craves that affection, they're not going to understand sometimes your lack of affection. So they show their deep love by providing for them and making wise decisions. So you're providing as a realtor, making the money, and maybe they don't see that as a value. So you have to understand that we as moms need to also meet our kids where they're at. Yes, that we are wired a certain way, but we're the adults here, right? They're the kids. They don't need to be customizing to us. We need to be aware and self-aware of what are our natural tendencies that we go to, and how do we understand our kids so that we can be better moms to them. I think as a type 1 too, you're able to overemphasize hopes and expectations to them in a way that they feel controlled, and they feel like the standards are too high. They can't meet your standard. So that's something to be really aware about, because, you may be achieving a lot at work and they're seeing you achieve and they're seeing you get all these awards and whatnot, but it's really important to make sure that they understand that they are loved no matter what. And I know that you love them no matter what, but it's really important that they get that. So, I always want to talk about a little bit about the mom side on our podcast, but I will dive right back into YouTube. So just like women, we just like to talk like spaghetti. I think someone was saying women are like spaghetti and men are like waffles. Men have their compartments and women have their like random thoughts all over the place, the random threads. There's a threads plug. So that's just my head all over the place. And I'm now going back to, hey, what are some ways that we can, turn that self-criticism that you have as a type 1 into a positive force for growth and improvement, So let's take a look at some of the top areas to grow, and that'll help us give us some strategies on what you can do as a type 1. So, one of the top areas to grow is understand that you're wired to think you're bad, and it doesn't make it true. So, just because you're wired to just naturally feel that way, it does not mean it's actually true. That is huge. That is such a huge, that's probably why it's at the top of the list, because there's nothing that someone can say to you. Someone can say to you, you're not a bad person, but you still think you're still a bad person. Once you identify, oh, I just always feel this way because that's actually how I was hardwired. We can change that hardwiring, right? We can do things, listen to books, surround yourself with right people that are encouraging to help you make that voice quieter. So, number two, again, it's to do with your inner critic. Acknowledge that you're not your inner critic and speaking out loud to and let others, including your coach, your peers, say that this is not who you are and reflect some self compassion and grace towards yourself. That's so important. Number three, notice your tendency to correct others and help them identify what the relational cost is to constantly critique others. So, depending on who you're talking to, they could really take that critique in a really harsh way, especially if you're thinking about kids. We tend to, as moms, kind of forget. I think as they get older, my kids are now teenagers and the youngest is 10, and I forget they're still my kids. They're not adults. And I tend to, I'm not a one, but I do tend to criticize more than normal because I'm a challenger. And when you're type 1 and you're always seeing how things could be better and you're criticizing that, you got to be really careful because it also impacts not just those around you, but also yourself, of just being that critical mindset and moving towards a negative headspace and into an unhealthy space that you don't want to go into. And that's exactly why your YouTube channel isn't taking off. You haven't even hit publish because you've got everything in the back end, but you're not quite sure if it's perfect yet. Well, Coach Melody is saying progress over perfection. That's something that everybody needs to hear, not just type 1s. So the fourth area of place to grow is to choose complete over perfect. So identifying good enough and how to honor it. Exactly what I just said, which is progress over perfection. Take that and grow and move because you need to try and move in real estate, in social media, in marketing to know how to keep getting better. My YouTube channel was horrible at the beginning. I have bad videos, but I didn't delete them because it's good for the traction. And also, it's good for you guys to see that I didn't just start right here. I started way at the very beginning, and we all have our starting points. The fifth area to grow is to practice self affection through acknowledging positives in self and expressing gratitude for them without qualifying them and what they still need to work on. So, know how to just appreciate yourself, right? Number six, learn to set boundaries with themselves so they don't miss out on the things they say they value. Should I keep cleaning or playing with my kids? Work or enjoy a book? You need to understand that there is joy in your life that comes with choosing playing with your kids and having a bit of a messier home. I was told as a young mom years ago that you can't have it all. You can have a sane mind and a messy house. What is it? Messy house, sane kids, sane mind, or you can have all of the things but have an insane mind and whatnot. I can't even remember the quote. I'm totally butchering it. But as a mom, we've got to give ourselves a bit of grace. You can't keep it all together because something's going to give. We are human beings. We cannot do it all. And we might think as a type 1 that we can do it all because we're perfect. We don't say we're perfect, but we know we can accomplish perfection, but that's not always the case and that's not always needed. The seventh area to grow is to find the gray. So type 1s tend to have everything in black and white. And so it makes you honor and have that integrity, but sometimes there isn't a direct right and wrong on certain situations and certain circumstances. So hear me out and don't turn me off because you're a type 1 and you're like, there's nothing but black and white. There are certain things that you can compromise on. When your kids want to do something, it's not always black and white, right? Maybe there's something that can be done in terms of compromise. so that you can grow in your relationship with your kid. Maybe when it comes to real estate, there is something you can do, maybe in social media. For example, there's no black and white when it comes to YouTube, right? Being consistent is black and white, but what you put out is completely a gray area because it's dependent on who you are and who you want to attract and what you want to accomplish with your YouTube channel. There isn't an exact formula. There's some formulas, but there's some areas that there's not. And that's where that finding the gray area is kind of, implying. Now, the other area of growth is to get in touch with your heart center. A type 1 center of intelligence is the gut. So the type 1s don't tend to go towards feelings. We talked about this earlier with you being a mom. Maybe you're not the most affectionate person, and that doesn't make you a bad person. But one of the areas you can grow in is to tap into that heart center and just understand, hey, I don't want to figure out what the right thing is, but figure out what the answer is inside of my heart. So taking that time to tap into your feelings and to determine, what this situation, what do I feel? What does this person feel? And I know it might sound weird because you're not wired to think that way, but that's an area of growth. And so there's lots of different things that you can do as a type 1 to learn, to grow. Hopefully this episode gives you an insight of a little bit more of what a type 1 would look like, but also how can you as a type 1 sort out how to conquer YouTube and how to get started. I think the biggest thing is analysis paralysis is a very real thing in doing anything new or with social media. But especially for you guys with the inner critics, I would like to say you are not your inner critic. You have a lot to offer. I want to hear you. We want to hear who you are. I can't wait to hear all about your YouTube channel. I want you to comment and tell me what your YouTube channel is and tell me your biggest win that you pushed record and you published it. You didn't just record it 20 times, but you actually published it. You didn't need to spend 500 hours editing the video. People will just be attracted to who you are and they're going to see you for who you are. So I want you to understand that you can embrace your perfectionism, take it for all it's worth, because there are some positive attributes to it. You bring a lot of great processes and systems to the world of real estate, and people need you. We need the systems. We always need systems. So people appreciate how systematic you are and how you bring order to the real estate transaction. But sprinkle in some of your authenticity. We know that you're a real person, and that is going to help you so much. It's going to help you embrace, and you're not gonna feel like you're just being a perfectionist. You're gonna feel like, oh, people actually appreciate my perfectionism. Any questions or specific topics you'd like us to cover, please reach out to us on our website or social media channels, melodywilson.ca. Together, let's unlock the potential within you and thrive in both your real estate career and motherhood.